My name is Patricia Kao. I work at BlackRock, which is a very large global asset manager, and my particular job is to create new ETFs, or exchange-traded funds. It's not limited to cities or sustainability in particular, but one of the things that I've found in my job in the last 2 years is that in conversations with clients or people who are in charge of large blocks of money, is there's increasing interest all the way from individual investors, maybe such as yourselves, to the largest institutions in the world, global reinsurers, sovereign wealth funds. There's increasing interest in how to deploy their investment dollars for sustainable purposes. And so to tie this back, I think the theme here is coalescence. So we're going to talk about smart cities. In the context of smart cities, there's cyber, there's all this other stuff. I'm going to be approaching this from the viewpoint of an investor, and then maybe at the end we'll talk a little bit about how you can individually help support some of the things if you want. If it's of interest. So I think the cool thing about smart cities is it actually does present a lot of investment opportunities. I happen to have grown up on the fixed income side, but most people are more familiar with stock pickers and equity analysts. And I think for them, the really cool, compelling thing about smart cities and this type of development is, what names can I buy in my portfolio that have competencies in infrastructure, in broadband, in wireless, in waste management, water systems, security or surveillance, transportation or mobility, things like electric vehicles. And all of those are really exciting, sexy new things. Unfortunately, I'm more on the bond side, which is how do we finance all these things? And in particular, how do we finance these things in the public realm? And so the really cool thing that's been happening over the last 5 years is, bond issues are generally pretty staid, boring, and not that easy to understand. A big company has tens or sometimes hundreds of different bond issues, and it's hard to distinguish. And you also don't really know what they're using the money for. They're going to the market, they're borrowing money from you as investors, and you really have no idea where it goes. Presumably it's for their ongoing operations, but I think increasingly there was a need, and the reason why the green bond market arose was because investors actually said, hey, we're happy to lend you money, but we want to actually know that we're supporting a sustainable project or a green project that has certain standards attached to that, and we want there to be accountability. So you have a wide range of different types of common bond issuers, people who need to, or institutions who need to borrow money in the market, that have started to conform to specific standards, and there's a whole organization out there called the Green Bonds Principles that have actually gotten together to let investors know that there are specific things that means. So you can have a very clean company issue debt, and you can feel comfortable knowing just the name of that company, or you can even have really dirty companies like utilities that are traditionally relying on coal-fired plants, for example, but they might decide to take on a specific project that is more renewable, and then this mechanism allows them to access the markets in a way that maybe provides a funding advantage over their normal means, or allows a project to come to fruition that might not have been able to given the reputation of the particular issuer. So this is something that we're seeing at the corporate level, at the supranational level, big organizations like international development banks, increasingly at the sovereign nation level, and as well as local governments. So BART issued a green bond, for example. I don't remember what the specific proceeds were for. But there are very strict rules about what that means. And so in the case of green bonds, there's I think 8 or 9 approved uses. It can be anything from clean water systems, clean transportation systems, waste management, increasing the efficiency of something that is a process that's already in place, or actual clean energy, so clean power generation. So all these things are, it's growing massively. The size of the green bond market outstanding doubled in 2017. So it's roughly, I think it's a just over $300 billion market now. But to put that in context, I think a lot of climate analysts are saying that to stay within the 2-degree scenario that we've globally agreed to, we're actually going to need between $15 and $20 trillion of financing. So we have a long way to go. And that's going to be across the board from private sector all the way to public sector. So what does that mean for you? And what does that mean for us sitting here with a gorgeous view of the Golden Gate Bridge? San Francisco is, I think, 12th on the list of smart cities. I think number 1, 2, and 3 are Singapore, London, and New York. So San Francisco and the Bay Area have some room, but I think the population here is luckily one that is very amenable to new technologies and sustainability and forward thinking. I think it's going to be important. 55% of the world's population lives in cities now. That's only going to increase as urbanization continues to be a huge demographic trend. And cities consume 75%, that's 3/4 of the world's energy consumption, and that's also 3/4 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So cities are going to be a critical player in addressing sustainability broadly and climate change in particular. So again, what does that mean from an investor's perspective? If this is something that appeals to you, you could seek out sustainable investment offerings, and that has anything to do from very small, bespoke, highly actively managed, and by actively managed, I mean on the ground investors, the professional manager or the portfolio manager is actually involved in picking out specific projects and involved in the day-to-day management. Anything from that, which is typically referred to as impact investments, sometimes not available to the general public, all the way to my world, which is very publicly listed ETFs that address sustainability in some way, shape, or form. Green bonds, even though they're a growing market, they're not that easy to access as an individual. You can't really, you could, but it'd be pretty difficult for them to find. You call up your broker and you say, I'd like the new, Belgian green bond issuance. I think is not something that really appeals to most people. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are increasingly more funds, I'm not going to shill for my own, but increasingly more funds in the market from a number of providers that address green bonds specifically. In other words, the very specific rules and requirements that issuers have to adhere to and also report back on in terms of the use of proceeds, as well as kind of a more general emphasis on companies or entities that are cleaner. And so I think with a wide range of investment offerings, that's one way that individuals can help advance the cause of smart cities and interconnectedness and sustainability generally.